Welcome to Building Sustainability Podcast with me, your host, Jeffrey Hart, aka Jeffrey the Natural Builder. Every fortnight, join me as I talk to designers, builders, makers, dreamers and doers, exploring the wide world of sustainability in the built environment by talking to wonderful people who are doing excellent things. Hello and a very warm welcome to Building Sustainability. We are back after a little break and we have got some delightful conversations lined up for you. But very quickly first, we have got some Patreon subscribers to thank. These are people who support the podcast financially over at patreon.com/building sustainability. You can support for any amount you want, or you can give £5 or more, and you'll get a hand-carved wooden spoon in the post. Because we've been away, I'm just going to do the September ones today. It's quite a lot. So thank you to Annabelle Cameron Duff. She has got herself a spoon. Rosanna Hunt, also a spoon. Ben Miller, a spoon as well. And then we've got Hanneke Lestuvier, Loué Jongsma, Chloe, Annie Benton, also got a spoon. Becky Shirley, also got a spoon. Loads of spoons to make this month. Thank you all so much for supporting the podcast. It genuinely means the world to me. Okay, so today's episode is the first of 3 conversations that were all recorded at the end of August 2022 when I went up to the beautiful Lake District to attend Woodland Pioneers. Woodland Pioneers is all about coppicing and coppice crafts. It's 5 days where people could come along and try out different crafts. This year, we made charcoal, we made a little wooden stool, learned to make treen products, and a riven oak panel, all the while discussing the importance and magic of coppicing. This is a yearly event, and it's organised by the Bill Hogarth Memorial Apprenticeship Trust, or BHMAT. In this episode, we are talking with Kath Morgan, who is the coordinator and administrator for BHMAT, about the organisation and the apprenticeship scheme. But first, we're going to hear from Mike Carswell, who is a former BHMAT apprentice. He's a coppice worker, and he was at the event doing some cooking, as you'll hear. I kind of interrupted him while he was doing that. So it might not be obvious to everyone what coppicing is, so I'm going to read you a little section from the BHMAT website. That is coppiceapprenticeship.org.uk. Coppicing is a traditional, sustainable and productive form of woodland management. In coppiced wood, trees are regularly cut off at ground level, causing many rods, rather than one large trunk, to grow from a stump or stool. The rods that grow from the stool are straight and long and can be used for many crafts and products. Most of our native species will coppice well. A coppice wood is cut on a cycle which can be anything from 5 to 30 years, depending on the size of the poles required. Coppicing is great for wildlife as it allows light into the woods, causing a burst of growth and flowering of the woodland plants, increasing the diversity of species and creating a variety of vegetation heights within the wood. A coppiced woodland will encourage a wide diversity of insects, plants and animals to flourish, such as woodland edge butterflies. In a derelict coppice woodland, many of these species are likely to disappear. So that's a quick introduction to coppicing, what it's about. We'll hear in more detail from Mike and Kath. A quick note, these recordings were done at the event, so you'll hear a bit of background chatter and vehicle noise. There's a church bell that rings. It's a live recording. I am back at the end, so enjoy.
So I'm Mike Carswell. I'm a coppice worker, professional coppice worker now. I'm a graduate of the Bill Hogarth Apprenticeship Scheme, and I now live in County Wicklow in Ireland after completing the apprenticeship. So I finished my apprenticeship in 2011 and worked in Manchester up until 2017, and then moved back to my home country of Ireland. and I've been there since.
Nice. And what brought you to the apprenticeship?
So I grew up in Northern Ireland, and then I studied music, and I went and did a music degree in Salford University in Greater Manchester, and after that I'd studied music for 6 years by that point, and I was burnt out. As much as I love music, it was intense, and I kind of ended up hating certain aspects of music by the end of it. Didn't touch my guitar for 2 years after I finished my degree. Just kind of a bit sad.
Really?
Yeah. But kind of through that now. But I realised that at least made me realise that I needed to be outside. And I think that was the main issue, was that I wasn't outside amongst nature. And I grew up amongst nature quite a lot. So my dad was a joiner, and quite an old school mentality. So I learned quite a lot of traditional woodworking growing up with him. And, he taught me Morrison tenon joints and things, and how to look after tools and stuff. And I also grew up beside a very large estate called the Clandyboy Estate in Northern Ireland in County Down. And that was my playground.
That's in country estate?
Yeah, as in, rural estate. And it's like 2,000 acres. And it's actually, they say it's the largest single broadleaf woodland in Ireland. I think they say that. Not sure that's entirely true.
People say a lot.
Yeah, I know they do. But that was my playground as a kid, and
nice.
there was hardly anyone there. So it was just massive open wood and sticks galore. Used to collect sticks, sharpen sticks, peel all the bark off them, sharpen them, harden the point in the fire, and then bring them down to the house. And after years of doing this, my dad was like, "Michael, what are you doing with all that pile of sticks in the corner of the garage?" And there was 100 sticks there, all peeled and sharpened. I didn't know what I was doing, just doing it.
So I was becoming a coppice.
I was a stick man.
Yeah.
There, stick kid. And I loved it, And so after I'd finished studying music, I wasn't quite sure what to do with myself. I was unemployed then, and managed to get on to a joinery and carpentry NVQ, which was quite good.
What sort of age would you have been then?
I would have been in my mid-20s, so I think I was 24 or something. Mm-hmm. And then I was just sort of thinking about what I was going to do, thinking more about, I think I would prefer to be working with wood. And then, through, whatever, looking at stuff on the internet, and I was I was reminded of coppicing. And as soon as I kind of read a little bit about coppicing then at that age, I was like, I know exactly what that is. I know what that means. And hang on a second. If you can really do that, that means that's actually something that's genuinely, truly sustainable. The method, the system. And it was just this is what I want to do. It just clicked. And then so I started, searching more about coppicing, and came across the Bill Hogarth Trust. And I was like, I need to do this. Wood and Pioneers, that's what I need to do. So I applied, I came to Wood and Pioneers and took it quite seriously and applied. That was in September 2007. I applied straight away and was interviewed, did a work placement with Rebecca Oakes for a few days, and then was offered a place and started the following February.
Great.
And I was over the moon. It was amazing. And so also, because I was living in Manchester at the time, I'd already put two and two together and realised there was an enormous woodland resource in Manchester that just wasn't being managed or anything. Hundreds and hundreds of acres of modern plantation and parkland. And so part of my application to the apprenticeship, I said that I wanted to become a pioneer of urban coppicing. And I think they quite liked that. And so I think that was one of the things that gave me a place, I think, because and then when I was interviewed, they asked me quite a lot about that. And I said, like, look, you know, I think this could really work. You know, there's a big resource there. There's a good market. There's a lot of people with gardens, and, you know, it worked. So I became one of Rebecca Oakes' apprentices, and I remained living in Manchester. And I used my bursary to pay the rent in Manchester. I travelled up to Silverdale Lornside area every week and worked for Rebecca. She paid me pittance, and I didn't care. And I went home at the weekends, and I gradually then started, you know, networking properly in Manchester, trying to find, you know, out how to do this. And tree surgeons were kind of a good port of call. One guy in particular called Phil Ben, who went on to set up a large social enterprise called Tree Station, which is a very interesting business in Manchester. They do tree work around Manchester, and they also take in wood waste from other tree surgeons and convert it into usable products.
Great.
It's a really good business, really interesting. Worth a visit.
Yeah,
and
because
you
normally
get a podcast out of that.
Yeah,
definitely.
Well, I know, like, all of the trees that come down in London are just chipped instantly, because that's
then you just need to get rid of it, basically. And chip has value, but it's not its highest value.
No.
Meeting Phil was really good. He was very supportive and probably kind of jealous, like, you know, of what I was doing, because he was really into craft and stuff, but just never had the time to do it. And so when he was setting up his business, his tree station business, at the same time I was setting up my coppicing business, and so he offered me yard space inside their bigger yard, which was really, really helpful. And he was very generous, very low rent, and we scratched each other's backs, you know, with helping out with work and stuff. And so there I found myself then at the end of the apprenticeship in like a mile from Manchester Piccadilly, in a yard in an industrial area, you know, axing out, you know, fencing blanks or whatever, you know, fencing stuff. And remember one day really early on when we had the yard, it was kind of a bit derelict when we started renting it. It had all the copper stripped out of it, and, you know, the lead had all been stolen, and we were having to like fix the whole place up. And remember one day the police helicopter was hovering above me for about half an hour, because I was there standing there with an axe, like, you know, green woodworking, and like they were just looking at me. I could tell there was nothing else going on. And they were just like, what's this guy with an axe in the city, you know? And like I was just like giving them the fingers or whatever. But it was quite funny, you know. So like, because it was kind of a bit of a novelty in the urban area, became like it was really good for like word of mouth building a business, because, you know, when people found out about me, they were like, oh, this is really interesting, like, you know. And it was really good with spreading awareness of woodland management stuff as well, because, you know, I was cutting, you know, went from working for Rebecca, we were doing a lot of coppice restoration on National Trust sites, and they were open to the public the whole time. You know, we were felling trees right beside public footpaths and stuff, you know, carefully, obviously, and insured and qualified and everything. And but then I ended up doing a similar thing in Manchester. I was working in public parks and was felling trees right beside people, towny folk who weren't used to seeing that. Got a lot of questions, a lot of dirty looks, bit of aggro sometimes, but in the end, gradually people realised what was going on, that I wasn't lying when I said they grow back. Because a lot of people just don't believe that. They're like, they don't grow back. Why are you cutting those trees down, mate? Is there something wrong with them? I'm like, no, I'm cutting them down so that they grow back. And they're like, what? What are you talking about? You're lying. You know, like... But gradually, I was working the same sites, and often you'd see the same people like walking their dogs or whatever. And over a couple of years, then they've changed their tune big time, and they were like, "Wow, there's the guy who does the coppicing," and it's very interesting that.
Nice.
So it was kind of education by osmosis, kind of. You know, I just got stuck in and did it, and I didn't really care what they said or thought, because I knew it was good, and I knew that it would did realise eventually. So I just took all the aggro on the chin and was like, yeah, whatever, you know, it's all, I have permission and everything, it's all legit. And eventually, you know, it worked out really well, and then people started asking me to do volunteering with me and stuff like this, and yeah, it was really good, actually. I really enjoyed it, but city life was hard, and I really started to feel it on my body and psychologically as well. Stress, and you know, like my yard was 2 miles from my flat, and I'd leave at 7:15, and I'd join a traffic queue, and it would take 45 minutes to drive 2 miles. And like, you know, and yeah, I could cycle some days, but like, you can't cycle with a chainsaw or whatever. Just it's not realistic.
So I'm conscious. Do you need to?
Yeah, you can keep talking.
Okay.
This is the Coppicing powered rocket oven. So we're baking all the bread and everything in. Tonight is meat night, so we're having wild venison shoulders, roe deer venison shoulders, slow cooked in the oven in like a Chinese style sauce.
Oh.
It's going to be deadly.
Sounds
It's going to be
incredible.
really, really good, yeah. So I'm just rendering down some pork fat in the oven at the minute to fry off the venison shoulders in.
So, yeah, coppice worker / gourmet chef.
Well, Lynn's the chef. You know, she's the caterer. I'm her lackey, but I love food and I love cooking. And I love meat, so I like the meaty bit. Yeah, we're both really into food, so we take it quite seriously. And,
well, it's appreciated.
Yeah, I know, exactly. It's very good for morale on a course like this, especially when some years the weather isn't very good, and like having really good food makes a massive difference to people's perception of the whole thing.
Yeah. Nice. I loved it. Like when I got here, because I come from more of either a building side or a crafts. You know, green woodworking for me is all about crafts.
Yeah.
But when I got here, I just felt like I'm with a load of people who know how to make shelter, and they know how to make, you know, warmth and cooking, and you know, with some sticks and a bit of tarp and a bit of infrastructure, right? Yeah.
And it doesn't take much. You just need a little bit of creativity and a bit of confidence.
Yeah.
A bit of experience, and then you can make a lot out of very little.
Yeah.
Can't you? And that's kind of the nature of the beast. That's kind of the nature of coppicing in a way. Because to a lot of people, they just look like that's just a pile of sticks. And like, it's not just a pile of sticks. It's my livelihood.
Yeah, it's opportunity.
Yeah. And opportunity to create really nice things. And people are sometimes shocked by like what you can do with a stick.
Yeah.
I call it stick tech. You know, like building things with sticks. And like sometimes, like, here's how I keep the oven door nice and tight. There's a little stick jammed in it. Yeah, a little bit of hazel.
Brilliant.
Yeah, that's how it works.
So, ooh, look at that. Get some sizzle. So, sort of following on from that, I guess, you mentioned that the city had a market, you know, for the products, and that seemed what's really become apparent over these last few days is that, you know, there's the cutting, but there's, you know, it can't really happen unless there's something to, you know, your livelihood is actually the selling of the cut stuff. Yeah. Not, you don't get paid to cut.
Generally not. Very rarely, yeah. It does happen occasionally. Yeah, so the markets, that's the crux of it, actually. And a big part of the apprenticeship is that you're working with someone who has an established business, and so you get the inside view of how a coppicing business works. And they're all different. Every single coppice worker's business is different. mainly for two reasons. One is personal preference, what they want to make and how they want to work. And the other is their locality and their local market. And so there's always a compromise between those two things. You know, you might want to make one thing, but it might not sell in your area, and you might have to therefore make something that you're maybe not super into, but that makes you a living. But generally, you end up finding a niche, and over time, it's what's interesting is that most coppice workers end up focusing eventually on certain suite of products that they really like and that does sell. And then they really refine those products and they get really good at it, and they become known as that product person, you know, the swill basket maker, or, you know, the charcoal man, or whatever, the beanpole person. So I did a lot of beanpoles in Manchester, like 1,000 a year.
Wow.
Yeah, it was great. Not every year, but like it was peaking at 1,000 like every other year or something. And it was fantastic. And like, you know, 500-600 pea sticks. And I loved that actually, because there's very little processing in them. I love cutting short rotation coppice. I find that a really satisfying bit of work to do. And then
how long is short rotation?
Hazel, you're talking roughly 7 to 9 years. In Manchester, you know, it's a bit warmer there, wet microclimate and weird soils. I was cutting on former brownfield sites, landfill sites. There's weird nutrition and some super fast. The hazel was cut in a 7-year rotation. I had short rotation ash, which is what is in the oven right now. It's come from short rotation ash, 3 years old, 20 feet high.
Whoa.
7 feet a year, some of it. It was averaging at around 6 foot a year. Some of them were 7 foot a year. Wow. There was one in particular, one amazing rod. It was like 21 feet, 6 inches or something. It was beautiful. It was mad.
This is just hormones in the ground.
Oh, you don't want to know. But I wasn't complaining. The surface was fine. I just didn't know what was going on underneath it.
Yeah.
You know. That was a site called Kenworthy Woods that was used to be a gravel pit, and then was apparently backfilled with all of the rubble blitz from Manchester in the 50s and 60s. And you could see where rabbits had been burrowing into it, and like this rubbish wasn't very deep. And they were like scooping up, like, you know, bits of Bakelite and old like lipstick from the 40s and stuff. Weird like domestic items were just appearing, little bits of leather like from shoes and things. Like they were just scraping it up. Funny places, but very valuable resources. And yeah, like the market was really healthy. It didn't take me long. It took about 3 years to build up the hazel product business, and then I was selling out every year. I didn't have enough material.
Yeah. And was that enough? Yeah, 1,000 bean poles, is that enough to sustain you?
No. I mean, that was kind of like the pocket money out of the hazel, and then the better money was coming out of, you know, making hazel hurdles and woven hazel panels, and you know, that was, although you need to be very good at making them to make good money out of hurdles. You need to be quick, and you need to have good material. But I think that's generally why we cut hazel these days, is for hazel hurdles. And then bean poles and pea sticks and hedge stakes are kind of like the pocket money bit aspect of it, the cash that kind of keeps you going while you're making hurdles until you've sold the hurdles, kind of thing. But if you manage hazel for hurdle rods, you get loads of other slightly lesser quality rods and sticks out of it by default. And so you need to be very efficient. You need to find a market for those things. I had quite a lot of orders for, you know, bundles, faggots, fascine bundles for riverbank defence that used up all the brash. It was great, you know. If you get orders like that, it's fantastic. You end up clearing out the coppice completely, like in the old days when there was nothing left. Which sounds extreme, but it's not. It's not at all. Yeah, the market was really good. You know, we have to be honest, like these days, it's not, coppicing used to be supplying, you know, light and heavy industry with a lot of consumable products from, you know, charcoal right through to, like, you know, even in the First World War, they were using coppice products in the trenches. They have those big bundles of sticks they had on the back of the tanks. They rolled those into a trench so the tank could drive over a trench.
Right.
That's a coppice product.
Oh my goodness.
Look at the photos. You can see hazel hurdles in the trenches in the photos, you know. Loads of chestnut wired paling and stuff like that. They had loads of stuff like that. And obviously firewood and things. These days, you know, we're keeping the crafts alive by selling to people who have nice gardens. It's, you know, it's people who really enjoy their garden and are willing to pay a little bit more to have a locally made product, and who also maybe want something bespoke as well, so something custom made, custom sized things, you know. And you know, it's mostly the middle classes, and it's mostly people who have nice gardens and disposable income. But you know, that's just where we're at right now.
How do you see it developing? Or how would you like to see it developing?
I think that's going to continue, but I also think that, you know, I mean, I think that's going to continue largely as it is for decades, but in the really long term, like centuries, we're going to see something else going on. I think we're going to see people, you know, either something's going to happen that's going to force people to live in a different way, or they're going to say, we can't keep living like this, and we're going to actively choose to live in a closer way with nature, which means we're going to be managing our local resources efficiently. And, you know, that's why coppicing exists. Coppicing was developed because it's an extremely efficient way of managing a woodland in a local environment. And it's one of the things that amazes me about coppicing as a system is that it's one of the few land management techniques that we still practice that has biodiversity as a byproduct. Like, we're not trying to make the habitat for the butterflies, really. As they say in the Lake District, if you want wood, you have to cut wood. I just want wood and I'm cutting wood. I know the birds and the bees are just going to come in after and do their thing. And they're like, thanks, mate, you know, and build a house here, you know. That orchid's coming up now. That's my favourite orchid. You know, they're not thinking about that, you know. Like that saying, you know, the sun doesn't give a damn if it blinds you.
Right, I've not heard that before.
Like the sun doesn't care whether you stare at the sun and blind you. He's just doing his thing, you know. Like that's the way nature works. It's not like, it's not actually morally judgmental, you know. That's why we have cobwebs in your house. The spider doesn't really care that that's your house. It's just a good place to build a home. So we were coppicing woodlands, and then the biodiversity, you know, the animals were like, hey, this is cool. I could live here. This has got everything I need. And then they took up home. And it's only, you know, like in, you know, the 20th century when the ecologists really realised that. I mean, you know, people probably did know that back in the day, but not like in a sort of scientific way.
Yeah.
It's more in a very natural way. It's like, yeah, of course there's butterflies there. They've always been there. And we always notice them after we cut the coppice. But like, yeah, well, that's just the way it is, you know. It's very relaxed, actually. It's not an intellectual thing.
Yeah.
It's a
feeling.
It's a feeling. It's a feeling thing, yeah.
Nice. So, the word coppice, where does that come from?
The word coppice, so it came into the English language through the Normans when they invaded in, you know, 1066, and it then entered the English language. So we had Old English then, and then we got a lot of French words through the colonialism of the Normans, and they brought the term. But it's derived from from the French verb to cut, couper, to cut. But that specifically means to cut with force or to cut with a blow, which is interesting because when you cut wood, like when you throw an axe, you're not just cutting. It's not a soft cut like slicing cheese. It is forceful cut. It's cutting with a blow. So it is a forceful. It's specifically the verb to cut with force, to cut with a blow. So we ended up using the word, coppice or copse. And apparently, in French, the name for a coppice worker would have been a coupicier, the person who does the cutting. And they also use the word taillis, which is a cutter or a cutting. And that's the root of our word tailor. The person who cuts cloth. So there are those two verbs, both cutting. And apparently, so there's this guy, is it Jack Hargreaves? Had this program on TV years and years ago. They're on YouTube about like country, rural living and stuff. Okay. And he is a little bit in one of them where it's like, it was never pronounced coppice. Even if it's spelt like that, it was always just copse. Even if it's spelt coppice, it was always just said copse. Uh-huh. So we have the word copse.
And what does copse actually mean?
It's coppice. It's a coppice.
A stand of trees.
It's a coppice. It's literally that. But what's interesting about that use of that verb, cutting, to cut, is that that's all they were saying. They're just saying we're cutting wood. It's a cutting. It's an area where you cut wood. It's not specifically about it then growing back, which then implies to me that the regrowth was kind of taken for granted, because that's just what they do, which is a bit of mind-boggling to some people who don't realise that. They just grow back. Most broadleaf trees, most of our native broadleaf trees grow back. In Ireland, all of the native Irish trees, apart from the Scots pine, grows back. It coppices. So then, interestingly, in Ireland, there's an old coppice woodland that was apparently managed by the Normans when the Normans tried to colonise Ireland. They weren't too successful at that at the time, but there's a wood called St John's Wood, which is very famous as being an old hazel coppice. And there were local people there who today still have commoners' rights to cut there. And they were asked about coppicing. And they said they knew what it was, but they didn't know the word.
Uh-huh.
Right? So they knew the method, but to them, they didn't call it coppicing. So if you're looking in other non-English speaking countries for coppicing, you're not necessarily going to find it as the word, if you look for the word. Mm-hmm. So you might have to look for the local verb, cutting. So in Ireland, it's gar, is the verb to cut. So I still haven't found out yet whether there's a specific Irish term for coppicing, but there probably was, and there probably is in any European country or other countries in the world where they did it. We're using the word coppice. It's actually not, that's specific to the Anglo-Norman environment, I think, really. But the system isn't.
Yeah.
This is largely a European system.
Is it?
Well, it's most commonly found in Europe historically. They definitely do it in Japan, and there is apparently evidence of it in North America among Native Americans to an extent. But in Europe, because Europe was historically very densely populated, I think we basically had to develop this more intense system of, because we were clearing land for agriculture, but we needed to retain the woodland resource. And coppicing is, in terms of acreage, it's the most efficient. Like 200 tons an acre, they talk about in like sweet chestnut coppice. Mm-hmm. That competes very well with a lot of other systems in terms of tonnage. So it's a very efficient system. It's like intensive organic agriculture, small area, lots of things going on, good output. And coppicing is a similar system. Small areas, lots of things going on, very high output, very efficient way of working, because it's a pre-mechanized system. So you have to be efficient. When you haven't got mechanized tools, you have to be efficient. You find out very quickly, the pitfalls of farting about with bow saws and stuff if you don't know what you're doing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's brilliant. Is there I'm conscious that I don't know necessarily the best questions to ask. Is there a thing that you feel like that we should be talking about?
We'll be back after a quick break.
Hey there, I'm Mick from the Mick and Pat Show.
That's right, and I'm Pat.
Looking for a podcast that's like catching up with old friends? Well, you're in luck.
We're here to bring you weekly doses of lifestyle commentary, discuss culture and politics, and top it off with the occasional beer and film reviews.
But it's not just about us, we're a community. Our listeners are our kin, and we let you all have a say in what we discuss.
So saddle up and join the conversation at the Mick and Pat Show. You can check out our website or find us wherever you get your podcasts.
There is something. It's slightly controversial.
I like controversy.
Carbon.
Uh-huh.
Carbon's the big bad boy. But all organic life on the planet is made out of carbon. And we're kind of being pushed into demonizing carbon in a certain way. And I actually think it's scientifically inaccurate. Because here's the thing. Good methods of land management, which are largely traditional, all have both biodiversity and carbon sequestration as a byproduct. And so if you're doing the right thing, you get the good byproducts by default. If you want wood, you have to cut wood. And wood is probably our most useful material. There aren't many materials on the planet that are more versatile than wood. And in fact, I don't know if there is one, really. And it's not, there's a carbon cycle, and we need to be working in the right way with the carbon cycle, not thinking about zero carbon. I'm actually pro carbon, but I want it to be good carbon, So I'm opposed to industrial processes, and working in a more harmonious way with nature involves carbon, and involves cycling carbon in a good way. And so I think it's a mistake to demonize carbon, and I think people who don't have a good relationship with a carbon-based product like wood or food or leather or something, and they don't have a good relationship with the resource, they don't quite understand that, I think. Town folk, no offence, but they're not quite getting it, I don't think. And, in the media, they're just all over the place. So it's just not really, I think we're sending out really weird messages to people. And look, you can be friends with carbon. And do you know how you're friends with carbon? You're friends with carbon by using carbon in a really productive and responsible way. Cycling it. Which is the same thing as having a relationship with a fellow human being. We help each other, but we're not abusing each other. A good relationship isn't abusive. And we need to have a good relationship with carbon. And everything that's organic is carbon, So don't be scared of carbon, basically. Carbon is good if you're good with it, And there's nothing wrong with charcoal. Charcoal's fantastic. If you're going to use charcoal, buy locally made charcoal, preferably coppice charcoal, because that is reabsorbing all those carbon emissions directly back in. And that's what we should be doing. We should be pumping the cycle. Because when you pump the cycle in a meaningful way, it works really efficiently. We keep the water cycle in good condition, keep the water clean, keep the toxins out of the water. Same with the carbon cycle. When you do that, and you can pump it really hard, and it's happy doing that. The coppicing system is quite an intense system. We're kind of pumping the ecology of the woodland quite fast and quite hard. It doesn't get tired out, because here's the thing. You get to a point where the trees won't grow any faster, and you have to wait for them to be finished. And that's nature saying, yeah, you can, you can cut me again, but I'm not going to be happy. So you're going to have to wait. You know, the sun doesn't give a damn if it blinds you. It's just doing its thing. And like, you have to fit in with the system that's already there. And we're living in a carbon system, you know? So like, we need to be cycling the carbon in a really positive way. And I think people need to think about that a bit more, you know? So yeah, don't be carbon shy.
My name's Kath Morgan, and I am the sort of coordinator for the apprentices on the BHMAT apprenticeship scheme. That's Bill Hogarth Memorial Apprenticeship Trust scheme.
Okay.
So that's me.
Excellent. And who was
Mm-hmm.
this memorial?
Yes.
So who was Bill Hogarth?
Bill Hogarth was a coppicer, a really well-known and talented coppicer in Cumbria. And he was coppicing was, there was a lot of coppicing in Cumbria. A lot of the woodlands in Cumbria were coppiced a long time ago. And when plastics came in, a lot of coppice items weren't used. They were replaced by plastic. But then in the 80s, there was kind of a resurgence of interest in coppicing. And I never met Bill, unfortunately. I would have loved to have met him. But he was really keen on training a new generation of coppice workers. He was really, really generous with his time. And she's now retired as chair, but Rebecca Oakes worked with Bill, and quite a few people who were at his funeral had worked with him and wanted to carry on this idea that, we would train coppice apprentices. And they decided, in Bill's, name, in Bill's memory, to set up this apprenticeship trust. And basically we've got two aims. The first aim is to get more woodlands coppiced. And the second aim is to train, like I say, a new generation of coppice workers. So a lot of work went into setting that up. I wasn't involved right at the start, but there was a core of people who sort of worked out how one would go from not knowing much to over 3 years learning more and setting up their own business in year 3. So, charitable status was granted, I think, in 2001. And then I think it was 2003, give or take a year. And again, I wasn't with BHMAT at this time, but they ran the first Woodland Pioneers. So Woodland Pioneers is a week-long course. It's an introduction to coppicing course. It's run for anyone who's interested in coppicing. But we also ask if anyone's interested in the apprenticeship scheme that they come on the week course. It's a brilliant introduction to coppicing and to the trust and to what we do. And it helps us as well meet potential apprentices. And we've just found that week is a good amount of time for people to, either just come and enjoy it for the week or to come and enjoy it for the week and then, really get interested in coppicing. So that's the first thing people do if they're interested, come on that week's course.
Mm-hmm. Last night, the apprentices were giving a talk, and I think everyone started with, well, I came on Woodland Pioneers and knew I had to do it.
Yeah. It is a lovely week. It's a smashing week.
Yeah. And so what's the apprenticeship? How does that work?
It's a 3-year apprenticeship, and ideally, I'll come on to the next bit in a minute, but ideally an apprentice is placed with a sponsor, a main sponsor who is a coppice worker who has their own coppicing business. And it's a 3-year apprenticeship scheme, and it's structured so that in the first year the apprentice learns the basic coppicing skills. So, learns to use a chainsaw, learns about, the woodland and what to cut and what standards you would leave, and seeing timber and, seeing sort of the trees and thinking what you could do with them and sort of naming trees and things like that. So they begin to learn about coppicing. They begin to learn about how a coppicing business works because it's very seasonal in nature. And they also sort of have a go at lots of different crafts. The idea is that in the first year, you kind of have a go at lots of things that you're interested in, because Bill actually in his book, Bill lists 100 products from Cook Copies. Yeah. So, and not everybody does every product. So in the first year, it's about, well, and you're an apprentice is with a sponsor who may be, maybe producing a lot of hazel hurdles, but may not be doing cleft oak, so we like the apprentice to sort of learn what they can from their main sponsor, but then it's about going and looking at all the other crafts as well and seeing where you want to go. Some kind of do what the sponsor does and but others go a different way. So first year is all about learning, lots of different crafts to see where you want to go. And it's about learning how a coppice business works and about coppicing. The second year is a little bit more refined. We expect apprentices to then, they can still try other things, but it's about honing your skills, really. It's about deciding what you want to do and making the most of that year in terms of getting your products up to speed and, learning what you want to do. So in second year, it's you're still working with your sponsor and going on other craft courses. But it's about thinking about your own business and beginning to decide what it is you want to do. And then the third year is very much about you developing your own business during that year, so that when the apprenticeship ends, you're not just kind of thrown into the abyss. It's you've had all that year to work on your own business and build it up.
Still with your sponsor?
Still with the sponsor, yeah. We kind of expect that as you go through the 3 years that in the first year, we base it on 4 days a week. So in the first year, we would expect an apprentice to be working with a sponsor for 4 days a week. That might, depending on what they're doing, we kind of expect that to go down as the apprentice is focusing on their own business. So then that transition from being with your sponsor to being on your own isn't a sort of a real big shock. It should be a nice, easy, smooth as it can be transition. So yeah, that's what we do. And apprentices have budgets. Please get this in your podcast. We are funded. We have to find funding for these apprenticeships. Unfortunately, our apprenticeship scheme right now doesn't fit with the sort of government's idea of an apprenticeship scheme. We really think it's important to have 3 years, and lots of other reasons as well. We don't really fit. So that means that we need to look for funding. So one apprentice fully funded is about £24,000. I say fully funded because we have lots of people who are so generous with their time and their tutoring skills and other skills that people don't claim stuff that they could claim. So we're really, really good at making money go as far as we can possibly make it.
Yeah.
But if we get the full funding, that's absolutely fantastic. But sometimes we'll try and stretch it out.
Great. And then are the apprentices being paid?
The apprentices get a bursary, a very small bursary from BHMAT. I think it's about £300 a month. It's not a lot. We know that. We acknowledge that. It's very difficult to find the bursary in funding because that's sometimes something that people don't want to fund, a bursary, but we always give it. And the apprentice is actually self-employed right from the start, because the idea is, well, I always say to first-year apprentices, ideally you want to be paid by your sponsor, and that's right, to be paid by your sponsor. But in first year, we've got to acknowledge that sponsors can often take a lot of time out from their own business. And coppicers, you don't coppice to become a millionaire, do you? You become a coppicer because it's a real true vocation. So it doesn't bring in lots and lots. Some people do. You can make it viable, can't you? But yeah, there's often not a lot of extra pennies. So I would say
if money is your focus, you'd probably go somewhere
You wouldn't
else.
coppice, would you? That's very, very true. So with apprentices and sponsors, it's very difficult for us to say, right, sponsors, you've got to pay your apprentices, because coppicing up and down the country is completely different. Some people, particularly in the northwest and in Cumbria, you can get paid to restore an old coppice. But, Twiggy, for example, down Manchester way, she doesn't get paid anything for restoring an old coppice. So to then ask that person who's not made any money from cutting to then pay an apprentice as well, we wouldn't be able to work. That's not viable. So I always say to apprentices, make yourselves useful as soon as you can, because as soon as you are upping the productivity of your sponsor, then it's absolutely right that your sponsor pay you. But if your sponsor's losing productivity because they're taking time out to train you, that's a bit more difficult. I will also say, though, as you go through the apprenticeship scheme, we do have assessments that they have to pass, and each year it's really documented what they have to do. They get a handbook that they have to follow, and it's really, really clear what they need to learn each year in terms of coppicing, in terms of business skills, and in terms of the crafts. So, and 2 of those assessments are demonstrating. So we expect our apprentices to demonstrate and do shows, because that's how the word gets out. And there is a 3rd year practical assessment, which is teaching. So we do, those are 2 really important parts of the scheme, really, because demonstrating gets the word out, and teaching one, it teaches other people the skills, but it's a good thing to do, really, in terms of
it consolidates all the knowledge in your head when you have to try and explain it clearly.
Yes.
But also, it's passing on. It's the whole spirit of the. It's not a foundation. Trust.
Yeah.
It is. It's the whole spirit of the trust.
Absolutely. So they've got to be there, haven't they, for disseminating all that fantastic information.
Yeah. So you mentioned that it's not the government apprenticeship scheme. And I think one of the things that's been talked about is the age. There's an age limit on government schemes, isn't there?
There used to, I'm not quite sure if that still exists. I don't know. I'd have to look into that. And I was before this course, and I will have another little look at that. But they tend to be aged. They tend to be sort of 18 to 24. Well, to be honest, the vast majority of our apprentices have started after the age of 24. So that we don't look at age, really. We look at the sort of the connection to the wish to coppice. We look for that enthusiasm, that motivation. Also, I was going to say, you've got to be ready to work hard as well. People come on this week, and it's a beautiful week. There's so many lovely people around, and it gives such a wonderful view of coppicing, and coppicing is fabulous. But, it's not 3 years of woodland pioneers. It's hard work, isn't it? Mm-hmm. So we, when we interview, we do ask about, how do you feel in the all weathers, and how do you feel about working with chainsaws? It's great to have the idea we can coppice with axes. And I know people who do coppice with axes, but it's a longer route to getting your coop cut. So we do expect a little bit of, chainsaw work. Some people do that more than others. Some people just do the cross-cutting and the maintenance and leave it at that. Other people go on in the 2nd year and 3rd year to do windblown. They get a training budget. That's what I should have said as well as a bursary. All apprentices get a training budget for each of the 3 years, and also a tools and equipment budget for the 3 years. And that's quite, they're quite decent budgets, really.
Yeah.
And they get an insurance budget, because we want them, they need to be self-employed, then when they, because it is about them doing it themselves. So as soon as you can start doing it yourself, when you're comfortable doing that, we expect them to do that. So an insurance budget and a little travel budget, not for day-to-day travel. That's for travelling to courses. Sometimes your course is a long, long way away. Mm-hmm. There's a good budgets for them to get. To get through.
So if someone's listening to this and thinks they might be interested,
yes,
what are the qualities that you
qualities of a good coppicer?
Yeah.
The passion for coppicing, the belief that coppicing is the right way to manage woodlands, or not all woodlands, but a lot of woodlands. It's the enthusiasm for that. It's the wish to be outside.
In all weathers.
In all weathers, yeah. Yes. To be okay with the rain. We have many conversations about at what point do you call it a day and go inside. People have got varying degrees of what they can cope with. But yeah, outdoors and just a love of nature, a love of, a wish to keep heritage skills going, because a lot of the crafts that are associated with Coppicing, well, I'm really happy to say that, in my time with the Trust, these crafts are coming back not into fashion, but people are being interested to get in these crafts. Mm-hmm. But we need to keep being interested in them, and we need to keep them going. So maybe a wish to keep heritage crafts alive. And Coppicing itself is a heritage craft, isn't it? And it's sustainable. Mm-hmm. So you often find people who love outside, love nature, want to live a little bit more simply as well. We have had quite a lot of people come into Coppicing after doing desk jobs that are soul destroying. Mm-hmm. So yeah, I would say that really. An enthusiasm and a self-motivation and a belief that Coppicing is a good thing for woodlands.
Great. And then what are some examples of the businesses that apprentices have gone on to do?
Okay. It is very flexible. It was made to be very flexible. And some apprentices, have gone on to lots of different things, really. Some apprentices have been with sponsors who have just been absolutely fantastic and have been sort of trying to, when they've changed what they do, they've passed on their business to their apprentices. So Rebecca Oakes, for example, are one of the founder members of BHMAT and a sponsor for many, many years. She had Sam Ansell as an apprentice, and for various reasons she went into woodland consultancy and eventually kind of passed her business on to Sam. Hazel Hurdles, so they both do, she did Hazel Hurdles and Sam does Hazel Hurdles, and then he kind of set up the co-op. He had that business on his own for a while, and then he set up a co-op with a few others that had been apprentices, but others who are absolutely fantastic coppicers who weren't apprentices. It's not the only route in at all. We've had other people, Twiggy, for example, who is now our chair, and I love that fact. I love the fact that we've had apprentices who have then wanted to stay with us, and they've become sponsors and mentors and trustees, and I think that's wonderful. That says a lot that we must be doing something right if people want to, stay in it. But Twiggy was down at Bodfari with Rod Waterfield. She did her placement down there. She has moved away from that area. She's now in Bolton, and she's a good hazel hurdler. Makes the best gypsy flowers you've ever seen. She's going to make some for the raffle. They are absolutely beautiful. And yes, she does a lot of urban coppicing around Manchester, sort of trying to, there's a lot of trees around Manchester, a lot of woods that need looking after. So she's into sort of urban coppicing and does a lot of charcoal, does a lot of community groups, community work. Who else can I tell you about? Jack. He was with Ian. Jack was the apprentice, Ian was the sponsor. They did lots of cleft oak sort of fences and gates and structures. And Jack has now set up in his own business. It's kind of the same thing, really. Ian used to do a lot of charcoal. But Jack's got a great business doing the cleft oak stuff. Ian still does it, but Ian tried to retire a few years ago. But we all know that we all knew that wasn't going to happen. So they work together. But Jack's got his own business now, and Jack has now got his own apprentice as well. And Jack's here this week making the T-temp frame.
Yes, so he's a timber framer.
He's a timber framer. He's a timber framer. Yeah.
And I'm really struck by there's basket makers, there's charcoal makers, there's they've all got that coppice kind of core, the method of managing the woods and getting the timber, but they're all doing something a bit different with it. It really is a wide ranging area, isn't it?
It really is, yeah. And we have some apprentices who, for them, it's the coppicing that they want to coppice, and that's their starting point. But even if even if your starting point is a craft that needs coppiced wood, that's just another way of coming at it, isn't it? But it all ends up with more coppiced woodlands, which is exactly what we want.
Yeah.
So
are you predominantly lakes based, BHMAT?
Well, not really. Northwest.
Okay.
When we started, we started in Cumbria. I mean, I'm not Cumbria. I'm actually northwest Lancashire, just below the border.
Okay. It's all north to me.
It's up from Moffat. Yeah, so we need. But Bill was no. It's fine. No, I'm a bit the same with from sort of Manchester down. That's me. I'm a hopeless. But Bill was based in Cumbria, obviously, and he was the last coppicer actually to learn the skills of coppicing from his father, for it to be passed down in that way. So when it was first set up, the first few placements were in Cumbria. Mm-hmm. But then we have slowly cracked out, and we've had, Twiggy's now. Twiggy did her apprenticeship down in Wales, North Wales, and now she's in Bolton, sort of Manchester, Bolton area. And, the co-op is almost in Cumbria, but they're Lancashire. And we've also had Tim Davis, who'll be here later in the week. He did his apprenticeship scheme up in the northeast. So we've kind of, we've stuck our noses in there as well. Mm-hmm. And our latest apprentice, Shannon, will be based in the northeast. And we've also had somebody in Scotland. So I think we'd be happy to support, anyone from the northwest, really, because the Smallwoods organisation based at the Greenwood Centre in Telford, they run the scheme nationally.
Okay.
So they sometimes have placements. Yes, they have placements down south, and actually, right at the moment, they are looking for two apprentices. Right. But then it's the same scheme. They run it slightly differently, it's up to them how they kind of roll it out, but it's the same scheme. They end up with a, Bill Hogarth coppice diploma after 3 years. And but they're sort of, I know they've had sort of Devon and Wiltshire and Derbyshire. I think Derbyshire is one of the places that they have at the minute.
Great.
Open.
I think that's all of my questions.
Okay.
But is there anything we need things that I wouldn't know to ask you?
I suppose one thing I'd want to say, just talking about the funding, if anybody listening has got any idea of where any money could be got at, that would be wonderful. I mean, I often write funding bids and Rebecca writes, but the people who are writing these, we're fine at writing funding bids, but it's always a scrabble of, right, who do we ask now? There are some fantastic trusts that have given us amazing funding grants, but it's always a struggle. That's sadly that's the struggly bit, really.
Yeah,
is finding the money to cover. So if anyone's got any idea of anywhere that I could kind of think, I'll ask them. Any trusts, any foundations, any charities that give grants,
get in contact
and just give me an email or give me a website to look at. Because sometimes people say something to me, like someone's just said one to me, and I've never heard of those, but I'll have a look. That sounds great. So any tips on where to look, gratefully received.
And what's your website?
Our website is, if you just Googled BHMAT, all uppercase, that would work, or the Bill Hogarth Memorial Apprenticeship Trust, or I think our email is info@coppiceapprentice.org.uk.
Great. That's brilliant.
Thanks anybody for any tips at all.
Many thanks to Kath for chatting with me and, more importantly, organising such a great event. I shall be trying my very best to return next year. And of course, thanks to Mike as well for letting me interrupt his busy day cooking up delicious food all week. There are various links in the show notes, the BHMAT website. There's a beautiful Woodland Pioneers video that was made a few years ago. There is a link to that Jack Hargreaves Talks About Coppicing YouTube that Mike talked about. That is really worth a watch. And it's quite dated in its, he describes everyone as a man. It's slightly jarring, but yeah, definitely worth a watch anyway. Link to Tree Station in Manchester. Also put a link to Coppice Conversations, which was a short podcast series about coppicing that was done. And the Coppice Association Northwest, link to their website. If I can think of any others in the meantime, I will pop them in the show notes. All right. That is it from me. Thank you for listening. And there will be 2 more episodes recorded at the Woodland Pioneers out at the same time as this. So head on over and listen to those. All right. Until next time. Bye-bye.